Well, awesome. It is great to have you with us. And man, we had a great party last night. If you were part of our group, we had 3 seatings outside, the band, comedian. We just had an awesome evening together. So thanks for those of you who joined us. Thanks for those who volunteered for that. It was really an awesome time. Well, today we're starting a brand new series. You come on a perfect day. We're beginning a new series called The 7 Wonders of the World. And if you ever research this, there's like 3 lists. There's like an ancient 7 wonders and a modern 7 wonders. We're going to look at these different wonders, these landmarks, and really what they represent, the things we all wonder about. All of civilization has these certain landmarks that mean something, right? Like when I lived in Atlanta, everybody in Atlanta would say, well, how do you get to your house? Well, you go past the big chicken and turn left. And if you're not from Atlanta, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But if you go there, there's a gigantic chicken by which we reference things. Kind of like first time I went to the Dayton airport. Somebody said, you get past Touchdown Jesus, and you go 15 more minutes, right? Remember Touchdown Jesus? Then he got hit by lightning. Now he's like caught a fish this big Jesus. So he's really been moving. My dad and I went to Sturgis one year because it's a motorcycle rally. And while we're up there, he said, on the way, we got to stop by my favorite landmark. I'm like, what's that? He said, we got to see the 2-story outhouse. Yeah, think about that for a second. I saw it. I'm like, I'm using the top levels, what I'm using. I'll tell you that, the 2-story outhouse. So today we're beginning our 7 wonders looking at the Chichén Itzá, or as our band says, the chicken pizza. Or some people say the chicken itchy, depending on what it is. So we're looking at the Chichén Itzá and what the Mayans wondered about and what we wonder about even today. Let's listen.
Wonders. Wonders.
I know that you can't see your tomorrow today. Will you let go, let go? Can I hold you, can I make you feel okay? You're coming alive, cry to your joy, cry to your pain. You're coming alive, you're just gonna wipe the fear away. I see wonders in the broken road, hidden underneath the dirt. Wonders in the broken road. Tell me, do you see what I see? Wonders in the broken road, getting stronger for every boy and girl. Wonders in the broken world. Tell me, do you see what I see?
Wonders.
So deep and down, and I know just how you feel in that place. Take a look around. There's a million little sparks of a golden age. We're coming alive, cry to your joy, cry to your pain. We're coming alive, you're just gonna wipe the fear away. I see wonders in the broken world, hidden underneath the dirt. Wonders in the broken world. Tell me, do you see what I see? Wonders in the broken world, getting stronger for every boy and girl. Wonders in the broken world. Tell me, do you see what I see? Wonders in the broken world, hidden underneath the dirt. Wonders in the broken world. Tell me, do you see what I see? Wonders in the broken world, get stronger for every boy and girl. Wonders in the broken world. Tell me, do you see what I see? I see wonders all around the world. Signs and wonders all around the world. I see wonders all around the world. Signs and wonders.
Chichén Itzá is an ancient Mayan city located in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. Renowned for its extraordinary architecture, including the Temple of Kukulkan, the Temple of Warriors, and its sacred cenote. The city thrived from the 7th to 10th centuries AD. The name Chichén Itzá means mouth of the well, referencing its sacred cenote, which the Mayans saw as a gateway to the underworld. Chichén Itzá's architecture blends Mayan and Toltec styles. El Castillo, the Temple of Kukulkan, aligns with the movements of the sun, creating a stunning visual effect of a serpent-like shadow descending the staircase of the pyramid. The observatory, or El Caracol, showcases Maya's astronomical knowledge, while the Great Ball Court highlights their sporting rituals. Central to Chichén Itzá is the cenote, a deep water-filled sinkhole in limestone. Beyond water, the pool held spiritual importance. The Mayans believed it was linked to Xibalba, their version of the afterlife. At the cenote, they deposited a variety of sacrifices, including gold, pottery, jewels, and even human bodies. This ritual was meant to help the soul's transition to the spirit world. Chichén Itzá's blend of ambitious architecture, fervent spirituality, and cosmic alignment earned it a place among the 7 wonders and continues to remind us of the power of spiritual devotion and human curiosity. The Mayans weren't alone in wondering, what happens when we die? We're still wondering the same thing today.
So today, as we look at the Chichén Itzá, we're going to look at this wonder, but really what they wondered about. And it's all the things we all wonder about. So as we move our way into the map to the Chichén Itzá, we're going to find, who are we? Who is God? What's the purpose of life? And what happens when we die? They believed there was a great sun god, and mankind was made by that sun god as animated or empowered corn. And the purpose of your life and mine is to follow the corn cycle. We are born, we grow, we are fruitful, then we wear out and we return to the ground. Very close to Hinduism. They believed that we'd rebelled against the gods, and what the gods required to exist was nourishment. And what they sadly ate was human flesh. So they would kill their children and their friends and their enemies through a variety of very brutal things in order to appease the gods. And often they saw the cenotes as a portal to the next world. And so they would throw people into those portals to prepare them for the next life and to appease the gods. But even that didn't give you any hope that you had appeased the gods. So they have another legend of Quetzalcoatl. This is this character, Quetzalcoatl. Let me try it again. Quetzalcoatl. And it was a picture of a deity that came from the heavens, descended into the sacred portal to the underworld, put his blood on the bones of those who deceased so they could live again. In the midst of the picture, it's hard to see it, but he actually has a snake head on the top of him. He was the snake deity. And here you see kind of remnants of like a little maybe Christianity in there. You need blood to raise the dead, a little bit of Hinduism. You just see all these different questions that human beings ask. And that's what we want to do in this series. We want to travel around the world and also look at different civilizations answer the big questions in life. Have you ever wondered why we wonder as human beings? Like, why aren't we just satisfied? Why do we need things to be wonderful? Why does our work need to have meaning? Why does our life need to have meaning? Why can't we just kind of live and die? You ever wondered why we wonder? Why we want things to be wonderful or wonder-filled? Or why when we think about the next life, we want there to be a wonderland with no death where we live again and there's a new beginning? You ever wondered why we wonder that? Well, the Mayans certainly did. So at the Chichén Itzá, one of the things that you see is that there's a system called cenotes, and they're really a whole system of underground cave systems. They go for hundreds of miles through Belize, through Cancun, and through Mexico. And in this particular one, they believe through underground penetrating radar that there's a cenote underneath Chichén Itzá itself. However, they're not allowed to dig that thing up. So nearby is what they call the sacred cenote. Now again, this is the Mayans considered a gateway to the underworld, and yet you see tourists swimming there all the time. Now I've never been to that one, but our family did get a chance to go to Cancun, which also has a whole series of cenotes. And our family's there, and I brought my mom and my dad and my daughter and son-in-law. So we went swimming in a non-sacred cenote, and it was just amazing going through the caves. And it does bring a sense of wonder of the transcendent, but also makes you wonder, is it possible to respect other cultures, but also say that maybe throwing your children and neighbors into a portal to die to appease the gods isn't right? But is it okay for one culture to impose its preferences on another culture? Well, not unless there's transcendent truth above it all. So that's what we're going to explore today by looking at three wonders. The first wonder I want to look at is there's a basic belief. If we were going to compare the Mayan religion and as scientific modern people, we say how silly they think they're empowered corn, how silly they think a cave will get to the afterlife. So we kind of think we're beyond that because our culture has a different religion. It doesn't call itself a religion, it calls itself facts, but it's really a philosophy. You could call it scientism or naturalism or materialism. It's the belief that the only thing that exists are things that you can touch, hear, taste, smell. Right? It's the five senses are true. Everything else is hearsay. And there was a basic belief since the 1850s that the more people got educated, the more people got scientific in their thinking, the more religion and myth would fade away. But that is not what's happened. Even a recent article in the Washington Post said exactly that. Religion and spirituality is growing in interest. Oh, church attendance is occasionally down, but spiritual interest is up, and the church is growing radically among Islam, Judaism, and Christianity all around the world. That's not what people expected. Jack Goldstone said, sociologists jumped the gun when they said that the growth of modernization would growth of secularization and unbelief. It's not what we're seeing. People want and need religion. Why? Because science, as good as it is, it doesn't answer those questions. Who are we? What's true? What's broken in the world? What happens when you die? Even John Lennon said it that way. He said, you know what? Rock and roll is going to replace faith, and modernization is going to replace all that need for myth. It will vanish and shrink. I needn't argue with that. I'm right, and I will be proved right. We're more popular than Jesus right now, he says of the Beatles. I don't know which will go first, rock and roll or Christianity. Hey, Jesus was all right, but his disciples, they were thick and ordinary. It's them twisting it that ruins for me. So I want to compare the Mayan religion to our culture's current religion, what I'll call secularism or materialism or naturalism. It's kind of this atheistic idea that the only things that are true are the things you can test with your five senses. And I want to tell you that these don't answer our wonders, they wreck our wonders. Let me just give you 4 critiques of the wonder wreckers of materialism. There's nothing more than what's material. Number 1, the first thing that it wrecks is that absolutes get wrecked. If you say to our culture currently, is there anything that's absolutely true? Our culture says, no, there's no such things as absolutes. You say, are you sure? Yeah. Are you absolutely sure? Yes, I'm absolutely sure there's no absolutes. There's one. It doesn't even meet its own standards. And 2, you can simultaneously respect a Mayan culture or a different religion, but you have to say that when people throw their children into the water to appease the gods, that's just their preference. Our culture prefers to love your neighbor. Their culture preferred to eat your neighbor. See the problem? You have preferences. You can call it best practices, but you can never call it absolutely over time and space, culture, right and wrong. And that's why you not only lose absolutes, you actually lose invisible attributes. Science itself is built on invisible attributes that you cannot test in a lab. The law of logic. Could you test the law of logic in a lab and prove it with your 5 senses? No. Can you prove with your 5 senses the law of non-contradiction? No. There's all kinds of things that are invisible attributes that we all know exist. We presume they exist. We talk like they exist. Justice is one. Integrity, courage. These are all things that are invisible attributes that we assign to meaning because we know they're true. And they don't pass the 5-fingered test. Even the golden rule. We have a sense that people should treat people the way they want to be treated. Why is it people in all cultures and all times, where did we get that sense unless it's something beyond our cultures? Even the Mayans have that. They got another word I can't pronounce. Lakyakalakan. It's their way of saying, I am another yourself. It's kind of the literal translation of saying, I am yourself, and so I want to treat you like I am yourself. That sounds like the golden rule, doesn't it? And yet, though they know the golden rule, it doesn't look like they lived up to the golden rule, in that they killed their children, their neighbors, and their enemies in a pretty gruesome way. In this picture from the Machu Picchu, of Chichén Itzá rather, we'll do Machu Picchu in a few weeks, the Chichén Itzá, you actually see a warrior, and in his hand, he's decapitated one of his neighbors. And you could die to appease the gods. You had to feed those things after all, those gods. But you also could die if you lost at a basketball game. I don't know if you saw in that early video, but they actually played basically hoops. And if you lost, off with your head. Now you might say, well, hey, that's one way to take care of the losers. Are you saying that's a preference? Are you saying, no, there's something wrong with that? You're kind of getting at this idea that even the Bible would say that there's this standard of golden rule in every single society, and yet we also know we don't live up to it. The Bible would also say that even if your culture teaches you that that's okay, it's not okay. And you know in your heart it's not okay, that you shouldn't treat people like that. Also, if you build a God and you create a God, no matter how sincere you are, you know that the thing you created can't be your creator. You also know that if your God needs you, like needs to be nourished by you, then that can't be God, because a God shouldn't need anything. Number 3, the third thing that gets wrecked is human rights. If you believe in racial justice, people shouldn't be treated based on their rights. If you believe in an idea of justice, if you believe that human beings have inherent value, that gets wrecked by, you can't prove that in a test tube. You can't prove that in a lab. That is a philosophical idea that can't be proved by science. In fact, there's many in a doctoral program in China even today, and China is not necessarily your Christian thinking hub, but even they are saying that the idea that every human being has inherent value, the only place you can get that is the Judeo-Christian ethic of what's called imago Dei, which is made in the image of God. If you remove that, you can say, well, people are helpful if they're productive. Well, what if they're old? What if they're young? What if they're not productive? You end up with horrible, horrible things. And lastly, forgiveness gets wrecked, just on a personal level. The reason I want to apologize when I do something wrong is because I agree there's a standard I broke, and I need to apologize for not reaching that standard. And I'm willing to accept your apology because that sense of standard I broke, I know I break it too. I'm going to apologize to you because I know I'll probably need some forgiveness later. Now, there was a doctor, and very, very accomplished, even in his early 30s, and he specialized in helping people escort into the final terminal days of a terminal illness. He wrote a book called When Breath Becomes Air. And while he was helping people deal with the problem of death, he realized that all his science and all of his medical training, which was phenomenal, was not helpful at all when the patients became terminal. And the questions they needed answered, and the questions and wonderings they had, he was not equipped for that. He didn't have any answers for the things that mattered. And then, tragically, in his 30s, he developed a terminal illness. And now he became a patient as well as a doctor. And he began to realize, I do not have the answers I need. And he began a journey of the answers that science couldn't answer, the things the Mayans were asking, and Christians were asking, and Judaism was asking, well, who are we? What's wrong with the world? What happens when we die? How do we make sure we get to a good place? And he found himself on a journey as a scientist, reading the claims of different civilizations. He read C.S. Lewis, who wrote a book called A Grief Observed, about losing his wife and losing his mom, and how Christianity allowed him to grieve, but also the hope he could see her again. See, if there is no afterlife, if this life is all there is, then the Bible says in Corinthians something we know to be true. If the dead are not raised, you might as well eat and drink, for tomorrow you die. No, you want to do what's best for your kids and grandkids. Oh, sure, but 3 generations from now, they're not going to remember you. 1,000 generations from now, the whole universe is going to blow up. Nothing's going to matter. You might as well just live for pleasure, live for yourself, because if there's no next life, you're not going to be punished for doing anything wrong. You're going to be rewarded for anything right. That's what the Bible's saying. So into this story, we step Jesus. Because while the Chichén Itzá, I've got chicken pizza in my head now. While the Chichén Itzá has this cenote, this gateway to the portal, in Jesus' day, the Greeks and Romans had something similar. It was in Caesarea Philippi. They called it the gates of Hades. And in Greek and Roman thought, Hades was not like, hell. It was actually the place that good people and bad people went to get to the next world. That's why Hades protected the gate. Well, Jesus shows up at this place in Caesarea Philippi, and he asks a question. He turns to his disciples at Caesarea Philippi, gigantic portal going down into the underworld, the Greeks and Romans believed, and he says, "Who do people say I am?" Peter said, "Well, some people think you're Elijah, some people think you're this, but I know you're the Christ. You're the one sent from God to come to earth to us." And Jesus says, "You're onto something." But he said, if you really want to understand why I'm here, I'm not just here to lead a rebellion. I'm not just here to do anything political like you think the Messiah is about. He goes on right after that and says, he began to teach them that the Son of Man, that's what he calls himself, must suffer many things, be killed. What? Messiah be killed? Yeah. But after 3 days, I'm going to rise again. This is way out of what they've thought about before. He's saying what you've heard in myth, Quetzalcoatl, right? From that guy from the Mayans. When you've heard from Dionysus in the Greek culture that God needs to come and rescue us from ourselves and die and rise again. This is myths through all kinds of cultures. He goes, what you've heard in myth, I'm going to fulfill in history. See, religion and spirituality is not going to go away. Which brings us to our second wonder. Have you ever wondered why we want to be wonder-filled? Why do we need work to matter and life to matter? And if atheistic scientific philosophy is correct, how could a meaningless, random, irrational process create beings obsessed with meaning who think they can study rationally and hunger for something greater than just this life? It's almost like what you wonder about can awaken you. Not just a wonder wrecker, but a wonder waker. Awaken yourself to the meaning of meaning. Why do you want there to be meaning? Why is it your soul is saying there needs to be more, something more than just this life? And you know who asks that question most? The people who have lots of money and lots of power. They've accomplished all their goals and say, it's just not enough. We got to wake up that we're made for something more. It's in every human being and every human civilization. Secondly, wake up to morality. We love the idea of being tolerant, but even when we say you ought to be tolerant to all cultures, you've created an absolute. You're acknowledging there's an absolute. We should treat people nicely. So even trying to speak it, you're waking up that there's reality. When somebody cuts in line for you or cuts in traffic, you acknowledge there's a standard. They should know that's not right. You're appealing to a standard of morality. I had a friend of mine who began attending our church 23 years ago, before I was even here. And in her journey, she believed people were basically good and basically did nice things. And then she began to encounter cruelty and evil. But she didn't have a box for evil. She didn't think there was such thing as good and evil. But she began to experience severe, intentional cruelty. Somebody set out to destroy her personally and professionally. So somebody invited her to church. She used to sit in the back row back at CCD, and every day she came in, and she was wrestling with, is there such a thing as good and evil? And if there is, it would make sense that what was happening to her was just evil, not just a preference, not just a difference of opinion. This was evil, wrong. And after 2 or 3 years of attending at Horizon, she began to be awakened not only to evil in other people, but like she didn't live up to her own standards, and that she needed forgiveness, and she needed God's help. And over time here at Horizon, which is our vision to help people comfortably connect to God through the Bible, a community of growing Christ followers came around her, and she became a follower of Jesus as she was waking up to evil, then waking up to grace, then waking up to God. I got a chance to go down to some Mayan ruins when I was in Cancun, that one trip we took as a family. It's pretty beautiful. So we're taking a tour of this place. And you ever been at a place like this and you get one of those tour guides who can just make everything come alive? I mean, they tell stories so well that they transport you from where you are back to those days. Yeah, you ever had a tour guide like that? Well, this was not one of those. This was the guy who's phoned it in. There's not any stories. It's like, wah, 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 wah. I mean, this is like the most horribly boring thing ever. I can barely stay awake. I'm carrying the water in the backpack for the whole family because I'm trying to be a good guy. I'm like, oh my God, this is so terrible. So finally, I lean up against a tree just to try and stay awake. I'm listening to the other tour guides who are actually interesting. And what are they saying? And as the day's going on, it's like the backpack's getting heavier. It's just like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. The sun is so hot. This is so boring. Now, what I don't know, my daughter took this picture, I wasn't aware of it, is every time my son-in-law opened the backpack to take a drink of water, he was picking up coconuts and putting another coconut in when he put the water back. So I wasn't just feeling tired. It wasn't feeling heavier. It was getting heavy because I'm carrying like 7 coconuts, which is hilarious. But wrong! That's wrong! You shouldn't do that. That's not the golden rule, right? You kind of know. You reference this sense of fairness. We all do it. And so in Corinthians it says, listen, we know there's fairness. You got to wake up to that. And wake up, you see it in art, you see it in music, you see it in story. Wake up to what's in your heart. Why is it that music, Mozart's and the classics, they speak to something transcendent you can feel? Art, why is it that art has these certain principles of what makes something beautiful, and it represents reality, the parallelisms of reality. There's certain universal, invisible principles of beauty. Why is it in stories? Every good story has something was good and it got bad, and we had rising action, and then we have climax, and then falling action and resolution. Does that speak to the world that once was one way? It's currently broken, building to a crescendo, and somebody will one day come and resolve it all? Is it possible that what you read in stories and art and music is pointing to something in your soul? See, the Bible says that its claims about facts, the questions you're asking, it says, I don't want you to not understand the mystery of death. So in Corinthians, he writes, we're going to all be changed one day when we die. The mortal, our mortal bodies that are falling apart, can put on immortality. They're going to put on a different kind of body, an eternal body. And death, we're all scared of death. That's what Freud says. It's going to be swallowed up in victory. Oh, death, where is your sting? Who's going to defeat death, it says. Oh, Hades, the portal to the underworld. Where is your victory? One person's done it, not in myth, not in legend, but in history. Thanks to God who did that through Jesus Christ. I know there's this obsession in America to think that all religions teach basically the same thing. What we're going to find in this series is that's just not the case. Let me just take the Mayans, Christianity, and atheism, and let me just, without much explanation this time, just give you the differences. When it comes to what happens when you die, the Mayans, you reincarnate into energy. You're not you anymore. Christianity, you're a 3-in-1 being made by your 3-in-1 Father with a body, soul, and spirit, and you will be a body, soul, and spirit in eternity. You're going to resurrect to life. Atheism, what happens when you die? You rot to death. As Richard Dawkins says, DNA neither knows nor cares, so you dance to its music. You should be lucky to have lived at all. Who are you? You're empowered corn. Christianity, you're a 3-in-1 individual. Atheism, you're just an evolved animal. And the reason we can kill off cows is because we're more evolved than him. Maybe one day the X-Men will show up and they'll be more involved than us. Is it morally acceptable for them to kill us then if we're just evolved animals? What about death? Mayans, death is an honor. Christianity, death is the enemy that God came to defeat. Atheism, death is the hero. How do you evolve? But that every time you die, you get better. The Mayans, you want to know why you're suffering in your life? It's your fault. It's called karma. Christianity says, no, suffering is very complicated. It's the result of a broken creation that's out of alignment with its heavenly Father. I'm out of alignment, so I do bad stuff. My neighbor does bad stuff. The drunk driver does bad stuff. Suffering is very complicated. Atheism, suffering's normal. As Richard Dawkins says, in a world of blind random chance, somebody's bound to get hurt. Get used to it. But we don't get used to it. We keep appealing that the world should be something different. What's the meaning of life? Follow the corn cycle. The Bible would say aligning yourself to the truth of who God is, your need for forgiveness, your inability to rescue yourself, using the gifts God's given you to accomplish His purpose. That's how you find purpose. For atheism, there's no higher meaning. These are just chemicals in your brain telling you something. You could say to your wife, I love you, but love's not a real actual invisible thing. You just say, honey, I have chemical feelings towards you. Which is very lovely for poetry, I might add. So do you see what's going on? So it brings us to the third wonder. Why is it that human beings, from the Mayans to the Greeks and Romans, why is it we want there to be a wonderland? Why is it we want there to be an afterlife? Why do we want a place that you never grow old, as Peter Pan says? Why do we want a place that there's no death and no destruction, no sadness? Why do we as human beings want that? Where do we get that? So let me jump you back to Caesarea Philippi. So if you see it on a map, it's just north of the Sea of Galilee in Israel. Here's what it looks like. They've set up a gigantic worship center back there in Jesus' day to worship Hades. And it's gorgeous. Look at that. It's a beautiful section. And this is where people thought you went when you died. One of the gateways to Hades. And it's into that Jesus says the most important question you can answer in your life when you're thinking about death is, who do you think I am? I'm claiming to be God come to earth. I'm claiming that I'm going to defeat death. I'm going to literally die, literally be in a grave, and literally bodily come back to life, and I'm going to show people about it. And Peter says, you're the Christ. Because you don't really understand what I'm going to do, but you got it. And upon that belief, upon that knowledge, what's he say? I also say to you, Peter, you're the rock. That rock is going to take on, that what you're acknowledging is going to take on the rock of Hades. On this rock I will build my church, build my community is what church means. And the gates of Hades, the real death problem all human beings have, will not prevail against what I'm going to do. See, what every story, every movie you've ever seen, at some point the hero dies. Harry Potter dies. He comes back to life. Why is that the story in all of our movies and all of our stories? It's because we know something in our heart says we need resurrection. And those stories and myths point to something that really happened. And Christianity is not philosophy. It claims to be history. And if it's history, you can check out the facts. Now that gate of Hades is what the Greeks called it. What the Romans called it was the gates of Pluto, because the god Pluto is the same as the gate of Hades. So gates of Hades is also called the plutonium. So let me take you to Turkey as we're traveling around a little bit. I got a chance to visit Turkey several years ago. And here in Turkey is this gorgeous, gorgeous section of Turkey. And when you look at that picture, what do you think the temperature is? Now, I'll give you a hint here. This place is called the Hierapolis today. It was called Laodicea in its day. Who wants to guess the temperature? Raise a hand. Is 50 or below? 50 or below? Any 50 or below? Yeah, a few 50 or below? Yeah, all right. Who thinks it's freezing cold? Any freezing colds? Like, Chad, you're setting me up. I know something's going on here. I'm there that day. This is what it looks like. It's 100 degrees outside. You are not looking at snow at all. You're not looking at ice at all. These are hot springs. People are bathing in the hot springs, and all of that white is actually calcium deposits from thousands of years of water being poured over these rocks. And people travel from around the world to this place in this location to bathe in those hot springs. So Beth and I are there. Must not have been 100 degrees. I'm wearing a sweater. So maybe it was 65 degrees, 70 degrees, whatever. It's very warm outside. And we make our way over. And just on the other side of these hot springs is a plutonium. And we arrive at the plutonium. That's the Roman name for the gates to Hades. And same thing. The Romans thought this is the gateway to the other life. And the Bible shows up and it writes a letter. The last book of the Bible is written to the people living in Laodicea, this location, who believed in the gates of Hades as the way to get to the next world. And here's what it says. Now, Jesus died. He's presented himself alive. He's shown it to 500 witnesses at once and many, many others. And in this letter, here's what it writes to those people. I am he who lives. I was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. Amen. And I have the keys of Hades and death, because I did it. What people wanted it to be true, what people hoped were true, I did it. So put your trust not in what I say, put your trust in what I did. So here's my challenge as we go through these 7 wonders together. I would just encourage you to wonder. Kind of wander in your mind where you wonder. Wander toward the things you want to be true. Why do I think there's a right and wrong? And I know there's a golden rule, and I tell myself I keep the golden rule, but do I really keep the golden rule? I'll just tell you for me, I have never, ever kept the golden rule for 5 minutes of my life. That's me. Am I really as generous to others as I am to myself? Do I give other people the benefit of the doubt the way I give myself the benefit of the doubt? Am I as patient with others' mistakes as I am with my own mistakes? Not a chance. So I simultaneously know the standard and I don't meet the standard. And I want you to wander in your mind, wander in your heart. What are the things you want to be true? Is there a God who's willing to rescue us when we can't rescue ourselves? Is there a God who did love us, who came to earth to make sure we knew the facts? What do you wish to be true? What do you want to be true? What do you wonder if it could be true from books and music and art? And I want you to just take some moments in our culture that just says, focus on the 5 senses, and begin to wander toward those questions. Wander toward the answers that are out there and ask yourself, when I gave you that list of the 3 different worldviews, which one rang true with your head and which one rang true in your heart? When something bad happens, does it feel like the right answer that you're getting what you had coming to you? Karma? When someone dies by a drunk driver, does it feel and does it think true that, yeah, they probably did something bad in their last life? Or does that somehow violate a greater sense of justice? I want you to wander toward the things you wonder about as we go through this series. And here's what's amazing. Christians believe that there is a heaven, and God came to tell us about heaven. He gave us evidence to prove what he did. But we're not supposed to just kind of hang out and wait for heaven. We're actually supposed to take the values of heaven and bring them to earth. Remember, Jesus says, when you pray, pray like this, on earth as it is in heaven. Until we get to heaven, based on what he did, we're going to act like heaven here. We're going to serve people. We're going to love people. We're going to help people. So for the last 20 years, our church has gone to a place known for its sacred cenotes. Hundreds of miles in Belize, 10 gigantic cenotes there. And it's there, followers of Jesus, doctors have come. Yeah, to talk about heaven, but more importantly, to be heaven. Because we believe there's a place with golden streets, where the streets have no name, and we want people to see it in the way we love and the way we serve. 20 years bringing heaven to earth. Let's watch.
I can't believe it's been 20 years since Horizon's been going to Belize.
Well, I had not been on a mission trip before and had always wanted to, so it was wonderful.
I remember exactly where I was when someone challenged me to go to Belize, and now, after 19 years of going to Belize, I'm addicted.
I had an opportunity 20 years ago to go to Belize, and it really just opened up my horizons.
When I was first asked to go to Belize, I wasn't really sure what to expect, or even if that would be a good fit for me since I am a non-medical person.
We need people who do all sorts of things, from human traffic engineering, which is keeping the line straight, to driving vans and being a logistics person, to counting medicines because we have to put them in bags to give to the patients.
As a young physician, you're frequently apprehensive about going away from your practice for a week, and are things going to fall apart? Are you going to be able to make it?
In the scheme of things, it didn't really take that much time out of my schedule. I could have easily been doing that through the years.
Nothing really changes at the end of the year except for your heart. It's fuller, it's more satisfied, and you realize that this is something that you can do for a long, long time.
It was very different also because we didn't just see one patient like we would in the States. You see a whole family at a time, which was really interesting, from a baby in the mom's arms to the grandma that was with them.
We operate on young children, all the way from newborns, and then certainly lots of adults.
We are called to humbly serve shoulder to shoulder, and that's exactly how I felt.
And many times they go thinking that they're helping us to help the Belize people, which they are, but they always come back saying, wow, I got so much more out of it.
It inspired me to be a little bit more trusting of God providing.
It's always something that I have always felt like I get more out of it than I put into.
After the first time I went to Belize, I went home and shared it with my husband, and he was so excited about it that he went the following year.
My grandson went as a 14-year-old, and it changed his life. He decided after that that he was going to go into medicine.
Almost every time you come away more blessed and having received more than you ever thought you were going to.
Have streets have no name. We're still building and burning down love, burning down love. And when I go there with you. It's all I can do. Our love turns to rust. We're beaten and blown by the wind, blown by the wind. Oh, and I see a love turn to rust. And we're beaten and blown by the wind, blown by the wind. Oh, when I go there with you. It's all I can do.
Man, it doesn't get much better than that. And can you feel it? Like I said, can you feel it when you're in music? You're connected to something, not just great music playing, but also there's a transcendent thought there. Yes, I want there to be a place where the streets have no name. Yeah, this world feels like it's dusty and broken at times. I want to reach out and grab something that's better than this world. That's why I want you to wander toward what you're wondering about. Maybe that's exploring spiritual questions. Maybe you see what we've been doing in Belize for 20 years. You're like, I've heard about that for years. I'm going to wander toward asking questions. Maybe you want to go on a Belize trip as a doctor, as a nurse. Or maybe you're like just somebody who helps kind of keep people in line. I went there and just played soccer with kids and did some magic and juggling. Whatever your gifts are, we can use it. Wander toward ways of just being a servant and being someone who loves people in other cultures. It's powerful. And maybe you've just been coming to the church, you like our services, but you don't really know a lot of people. Maybe you want to wander toward wondering how to connect. We have some women's groups starting up. Just a chance to kind of get some people. We're going to talk about prayer together. And it's really a chance just to get some people who know your name for a few weeks. And there's details in the program, but just connect and say, I want to kind of wander, and I'm going to check it out. I'll just go 1 week. I don't have to commit to the whole thing. I just want to try it out. Or maybe you were last night, you came and heard Ken Kinkton, who just had a great time. We laughed out loud. We had such a great time. And you're like, I'd like to meet some other guys around here. I thought all Christians were fuddy-duddy, arrogant, finger waggers. I kind of like some of the people here. Ken's going to be back speaking here in about 2 weeks. And then that night, Sunday nights and Monday mornings, he's doing something called Authentic Manhood. Great chance to meet some guys, either Sunday night or Mondays, and just kind of wander toward getting connected in a little small way. All right, thanks for being here. Join us next week for Wonder number 2.